Hello and welcome to Homebrew number 23. This one is an English IPA. However, that is just half of the story. And the important half of the story is in this box. You see, over Christmas, Aldi was selling a mulled wine warmer for just 30 quid. And lots of people were posting on forums, isn't that just a tea urn? And couldn't we use that for brewing the bag? Well, that is the experiment for this homebrew. Can we use a 30 quid tea urn to brew in the bag? The capacity of this is around 16 litres. So going on to Brewfather and doing some number crunching, effectively what that means is I can do a 9 litre batch, which is going to require around about 15 litres of water. So the first thing I did was go on to Get A Brewed. Now Get A Brewed do a custom kit and this is the result. They've effectively milled all of the grain for me. Got the hops, some rice hulls in there as well. So everything I need for this brew is all ready to go. There is a temperature gauge here on the side and I have actually been doing some testing just to see how accurate it is. It is slightly off, but it is consistently off. So therefore I know exactly how to adjust it to try and get the right temperature for this. In actual fact, what we have, when it's reading around 59 degrees on here, it's actually around 64. So we know that it's around about 5 degrees out. Brew day is finally here and this is the ingredients for our English IPA. We have our Brewfather recipe, so I've got everything ready there. Our Citra Hops with an alpha acid of 13.9, which I've fed into the recipe so we can sort of see that. I've also got some Verdant IPA ale yeast. I've not used this one before, so looking forward to that. I've measured out the various water chemicals, which are 1 gram of calcium chloride, 0.4 grams of canning salt, 0.7 grams of Epsom salt and 3.4 grams of gypsum. Also in there we have 5 grams of Irish moss, and this was supposed to be 5 grams of Fermaid-O, but I made a slight error and it's 7 grams. Never mind. And here we have the main event, Maris Otter of course at 2.4 kilograms and 150 grams of light Munich malt all milled for us there, and we also have 150 grams of rice hulls. Also in terms of equipment, we also have our pH reader and thermometer, and over in sanitisation, I've already sanitised the hydrometer, the measuring cylinder, a good big spoon, the wine thief, the airlocks and bungs, the muslin bags, which we'll come back to later, and some new additions. I've got some clips for this exercise and 2 5-litre demijohns. But the first step is going to be moving 14 litres of distilled water into here. Failed at the first step, I can't get into the water. Fortunately, I had a solution. I figured 5 litres at a time was probably less accident prone. The last measure was 4.3, so we've got 14.3 litres ready to go. I've set the temperature to 70 degrees. Now that is actually set on the dial to 65 because there seems to be consistently 5 degrees out, but I will just double check the temperature once we get to that stage. I've combined together the water chemicals and measured out the hops. So the first hop addition is 6 grams, second hop addition is 10, and then the final in the hop stand is 15. The temperature is approaching 60 degrees, so I'm just going to add the water chemicals now and then set up ready for the brew in the bag. I am quite obviously working this out as I go along, but here we go. The heating element has just turned off, it's 11:23 and we're just a smidge over 70. Rock and roll. Turn this down to 67, check that in a second. I can see some impressive levels of clumping going on in there. Look at that. Since this is the first brew in the bag that I've done, and I'm not going to sparge on this occasion, I'm just going to remove the bag at the end, I figured that some rice balls would be helpful to just help make sure we get as much as we possibly can out of those sugars. I can feel some of that clumping in there, something I've not experienced before on the smaller batches. So temperature is coming down now, close to 67. See you back here in 60 minutes. My first all-grain brew of 2023 is finally underway and happily mashing over there. So I'm just going to get the hops ready, and I've picked up these little hop bags or muslin bags to put the hops in, and that'll just make it easy when I transfer to the fermenter and I can just fish them out. So, try. Cheers everyone. The heater just kicked in, keeping it at temperature. I'm going to take a sample. pH reading on it. pH has come in at 5.6. The optimum range for the mash is 5.2 to 5.5. Therefore, if I add 3 millilitres, it would bring it down by about 0.2, and that would put me back in the right range. This is 3 ml of lactic acid. Wow, 67 dead. For this upcoming next step, thankfully my strainer will still come in handy. It's been an hour, so we can start raising up the temperature. Now I confess, although it smells wonderful, it does look a little weaker than I was expecting. And it is quite heavy, as I was expecting. Here's where all those pulley systems you see definitely come in handy. Taking a pre-boiled sample is at least a little easier. I'll try not to spill this one. It took 15 minutes to bring it up to the boil. So our first hop addition is 6 grams of Citra. For a mulled wine warmer, it's a pretty vigorous boil. The 15-minute hop addition is 10 grams of Citra. That is a bit vigorous. The 10-minute addition is Irish moss for clarity. The volume is still over 11 litres. The 30-minute boil is complete, so the temperature can come down. And in fact, I can turn this off. The boil is complete. We're just letting it cool now to 75 degrees, where we'll do the final hop addition. Now, a few interesting things about our mulled wine warmer. first the boil was pretty vigorous all the way through, and I did leave the lid on. However, that means our volume does seem a bit high, so it'd be interesting to see exactly what we end up with. The higher volume may result in a lower gravity, so that's going to be an interesting test in a moment. Cooling is also a bit of a problem with this. I don't have a water chiller because I used to chill in the sink. So I'm going to cool once I've transferred to the fermenter. However, for cooling just down to 75 degrees, shouldn't take too long, I hope. An interesting point of note, now I've turned the heat off, I still almost have a bit of a rolling boil going on here. The pre-boil wort is down to a reasonable temperature. We can finally do a hydrometer reading. That's 1046 versus a target of 1049. Okay, pretty good. pH 5.21. The temperature is down to 74 degrees, so we're ready for our final hop stand addition of 15 grams of Citra. We have 30 minutes in this stage, and then we move to the fermenter. This next step is simplified theoretically by the presence of a tap. Just a little bit of a cleaning issue. Dishwasher tablets are supposed to be the answer. We'll see. Okay, I'll give you the dishwasher tablet wasn't a bad option. Since cooling is a bit awkward, I'm just going to pause here for a little while, let that cool, and then we'll come back for the very final stage of brew day. Cooling naturally has not been a great success. We've reduced it down to 30 degrees, but we need to get it down to about 23. So I'm going to go for plan B. Not the fastest option that I could have chosen, but we're almost there. We are at room temperature, so it is time for a hydrometer reading. So this is the original gravity. That's leapt up quite a lot. So that's a smidge over 152 against a target of 155. So that's not bad. pH is 5.05. Our final step then, 5 grams of Fermaid-O and 5 grams of yeast go into each. A little swish because it's all stuck on the top there. So that's it. My first all-grain brew of 2023 is finally in the bag, and it's a big one, double the size of my normal all-grain brews. That was quite good fun. We'll see what happens, but I think we're okay. So I think it's time to kick back and relax. One of my favourites. Well, cheers everybody. Please like and subscribe, and we'll move on to fermentation. 8 hours later, we're on the way. It's day 2. Everything's been a bit overactive. I'm going to go have a clean up. We are day 3, so it's time for some dry hopping. Now, here's where we're going to deviate between the 2 batches slightly. Batch number 1 is going to have 10 grams of Citra. Batch number 2 is going to have 10 grams of Mosaic. Slightly different flavours through the hops, and that should come through in the final dry hopping. So, looking forward to checking out the differences. Citra being more fruity and Mosaic being more spicy. We'll see how that goes. It's also interesting because we're now using some glass demijohns to be able to see the progress of the fermentation. It's only day 3, but the number of bubbles in the bubbler have definitely slowed down quite a lot. You can see quite a lot of yeast there at the bottom, and the colour is moving towards that nice golden colour that we're hoping for. So far, so good. This is a fairly simple task. We're just going to whip out the airlock, pop the muslin bag in, and away we go. We're on day 5, and it warrants a little closer look. First of all, the lees is quite wispy and sandy at the bottom, but levelling out nicely. The temperature that we've seen has been stayed in the range 18 to 20 as we desired, so that's positive. And the colour is starting to clear, and a lovely golden IPA colour, so we're in the right ballpark. Just slightly perceptible is a slightly darker colour in the Mosaic over the Citra, which is interesting. I'm not entirely convinced at first whether my eyes were deceiving me, but having moved them into different lights, I do think there is a slightly different tint coming through now on the Mosaic over the Citra. But other than that, things are staying fairly calm. There is still an occasional bubble in the bubbler. Other than that, I think we are sort of coming through to the end of fermentation. The pressure remains positive in the bubbler, and as you can see, the Citra is still giving the occasional bubble, as is the Mosaic, but they are few and far between now. We are IPA day 7, and it's time for the Citra IPA to go into the keg, and it's time for the dry hops to come out of both. Unfortunately, on this occasion, I don't have enough space in my fridge to cool this down, but it is quite cool. So we're going to give it a blast of CO2 to give it a bit of protection, and then we're going to siphon the Citra IPA across. Shock. So, take 2 with the CO2. Try that again. So the Citra IPA is in the keg, so it's time to put some CO2 into it. That's just a touch over 10 psi, so that's just what we need. Now just need to let out some of the air. That can go away for about 10 days and then we should have the right level of carbonation. Meanwhile, some cleaning to do, and getting the dry hops out of here is going to be a bit of an issue. So it turned out that not leaving a piece of string so I could get hold of the hops to pull them out was a big mistake, and I couldn't get the dry hops out of the demijohn. That's fine, because this gives us an opportunity with the Mosaic to be able to just simply rack it off for a couple of weeks and put it to one side and then come back when I'm ready. So that's my plan. I'm going to simply get another demijohn, siphon it across, give it a blast of CO2 and then put an airlock in it and move it just to one side just for a short while. So, game on! This has all been sanitised since we used it last, which was just a few minutes ago. Give it a bit of a blast. There's quite a lot of headroom here. Well, that all went fairly smoothly. So there's nothing more really to do for a couple of weeks. Just let this carbonate, just give this a little bit more time, and then we can actually move it to either to the keg or into some bottles. So we are ready to just sit back and find another brew. Yes, I made a schoolboy error. I forgot to take hydrometer reading. I'm about to correct that now. Let's have a closer look. One last thing to mention while I was washing up was the aroma from the demijohns. From both of them, the aroma was absolutely terrific. So I am really quite looking forward to the taste of these two beers. However, there was almost no difference in the aroma from the Mosaic and the Citra, and that could be because it's a bit too early, but it could also be there was quite a heavy dose of Citra in those early stages, both the boil and the hop stand, which could have just been more than the Mosaic, and we may just get a subtle blend of that coming through. We will see. Either way, the one that's gone into the keg, I am counting down the days for that one to be ready. Well, I've been away on holiday and this has been carbonating, so it's time to give it a try. With a little party tap. Well, a bit hazy, but that poured quite nice. We have a nice one finger frothy head on there, so that is looking promising. A bit more hazy than I expected. It definitely has that tropical scent. It was what I was expecting, it was what I was hoping for by doing Citra and more Citra. So I am very much looking forward to see how this one did turn out. Very good, I am so pleased. Now when we did this one, I was very much looking to understand Citra more and basically, like a smash beer, just understand the notes that it brings to the table. Wow, it actually brings a lot of that aroma, a lot of that tropical aroma, very, very much in the style of the IPA we were looking for. It doesn't taste alcoholic at all, it's not a strong hit flavour-wise. has a full mouth feel to it, but still quite light. Cheers. Despite the extended period of carbonation, it's carbonated but not over-carbonated. I think I have finally got the hang of setting the PSI level to the right level just to give it the carbonation that it needs. Setting it at 10 PSI for that period of time has just worked. There is the right level of bitterness coming through. It's not a strong level of bitterness, but it's actually quite a flavourful level of bitterness. For my first all-grain brew of 2023, this one I will chalk up to mostly a success. The clarity definitely went a little bit awry there. I'm not sure if that is just because I've been on holiday and it has been in the fridge a lot longer than usual, but other than that, oh, and the carbonation is clearly quite right. I wonder if some of that haziness comes from the fact this is the first pour, so we're going to do another one. So on the second pull, still got a good head. Didn't get the clarity I was perhaps hoping for, but never mind, almost there. Good flavour though. So cheers everybody, don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy homebrewing. Yesterday I poured my first beer and the aroma and the taste was wonderful, but there was a couple of things about it I wasn't so sure. First, I wasn't quite sure whether it was a little pale. Today actually I feel a little bit better about it. It probably is in the right range. And secondly was that haziness. I did shake up the keg a little bit when I was moving it around yesterday. So today I've pretty much left it alone in the hope that it might settle, just in case some of that sediment would kicked up, and that's what was giving it its hazy colour. It does look a little better today than it did yesterday, but actually it's still got that slight haze to it. But meanwhile, the taste has come out wonderful. Citra was something I was particularly interested in trying out a bit more. Just those tropical notes definitely come through. I think in hindsight, the flavour as well has that touch of grapefruit. It does go down very smoothly. So yeah, very much a success on this batch. But we're going to move across to batch 2, which is going to sort of add to the Citra some Mosaic in the dry hopping to see if that gives it something more of a spicy note. Cheers everyone. Here we are with the tasty but hazy Citra IPA. But what we're going to do with the Mosaic dry hopped version is to put some finings in and see if we can get a bit more clarity from that brew. Now these are the finings I'm going to use. I need to put 5 ml of A and B in an hour apart, and that will help to clear. But I also have to mix it in. So we've got quite a good amount of shrub here at the bottom. So before I mix it in, I am going to siphon to a secondary vessel, then add the first set of finings. Right, game on. So that's 5 ml. I'm going to give it a normal blast of CO2. We've got a lot of headroom here, and I am going to come back in an hour to add some more. Our first stage complete, and then we'll see how the finings gets on. So the hour is up and it's time for part B. Now this is actually gelatin, so you have to be a bit careful. It's not gluten-free, for example, but as I say, I've had quite good success with this before. We're there. Okay, 5 ml. The instructions are to give it a good mix. I still think there's some actually starting to fall out already at the bottom. Now, according to the instructions, we put it away for 24 to 72 hours, and then we want to move it off any trouble that's sort of dropped out to the bottom. So I'm actually ready to move it to the keg. This was my last pour this evening of the Citra Dry Hopping version of the IPA. Okay, we'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching. This really has cleared up quite a lot in the last 24 hours. So we're going to move it to a fridge for another 24 hours and then move it to the keg for carbonation. It's been 48 hours, so I'm going to siphon to the keg. It's definitely looking much clearer. Not perfect, but you can certainly see through it. Okay, so we are at 10 psi, where I'm going to leave it for a week to just carbonate. Well, we've still got some trub despite racking a couple of times. This time it's from the finings that we added. Here we are then a week later, and look at the clarity of that. That has come out superb. Head retention, just poured it, wasn't great, but carbonation after a week is nearly perfect. And the aroma, it's very similar to the previous batch. The slight difference with the Mosaic doesn't come through in the aroma. However, it does come through in the taste. While you get those fruity aromas from the Citra, in the aftertaste you do get something more of that earthy taste from the Mosaic, I think. You can tell the difference between the two batches. And I'm not sure which one I prefer. Although it should be aroma, it does seem to be a little bit more bitterness coming through in the aftertaste. Happy homebrewing. Thanks for watching, everybody. Cheers. Welcome to our lessons learned, and this one was our great experiment, the Aldi Mulled Wine Warmer. So lesson number 1, how did that turn out? Well, for 30 quid it turned out fantastic. Although it was a little bit high on the volume at the end, that didn't matter. It was a fantastically tasting English IPA that we did. Which leads us neatly to lesson number 2. Was it really an English IPA? Well, certainly it fell within all of the beer classifications or categories, so from that point of view it did, but we didn't really use any English hops in there, and I think to be a true English IPA that was probably a necessity. However, I did want to try out the Citra, and the Citra did taste fantastic. So whether it's just a standard IPA or English IPA, the result was great. Lesson number 3 is the pH readings. I've started to get the hang of this now and actually take the readings at the right time in the right places. I did add a little bit of lactic acid just to get the levels right, and we monitored that through then to conclusion. So the pH probably wasn't hugely out of kilter and would have been fine, but this understanding of pH readings and monitoring is all helping. Lesson number 4 then was the cleanup. Surprisingly, that little bit of burnt stuff on the bottom cleaned up really well using a dishwasher tablet and scrubbing it with that. Go figure. Thank you, Google. Lesson number 5 was to do with the sparge, of which I didn't have one in this instance, and I think as a result of that it was slightly less efficient and I didn't get the best out of the grains. I am going to revisit this one, I think, and see what I can do in the future, but it was a classic brew in the bag with no sparge, so you know, it worked pretty well. Lesson number 6 is those Citra hops. Weren't they fantastic? Those tropical notes and grapefruit flavours really did come through, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It was interesting though, I think, that I dry hopped with Mosaic and Citra in 2 separate batches, and I did actually prefer the Mosaic as I drank down that final keg, so a little bit of combination was definitely a good thing. However, Citra, wonderful in my book and fantastic in an IPA. Lesson number 7 is the rice hulls. Now I think I was mistaken. I purchased these really to try and help with efficiency, and I'm not sure it really does help with efficiency. The real use of rice hulls is to help prevent a stuck sparge where you can't extract the wort out of the grains because it all becomes a bit too sluggish. However, I think as a safety net I will probably continue to use rice hulls, but my original anticipation that it would help with efficiency I don't think is true. It is more of a safety measure to ensure that you don't get a stuck sparge. Lesson number 8. Not quite so good, this one. This was the cooling. Obviously hadn't really planned ahead sufficiently to really think through how I was going to do cooling on a larger scale. I'm planning my next brew and I still haven't quite figured out unless I actually splash out and purchase myself a cooling plate coil thingy to help with this. Think that's probably going to be necessary. Lesson number 9, I need a pair of gloves. Yep, you see everybody wear them when they're doing these bigger batches, and certainly when I was pulling out the grains, that would have been of benefit. Amazon, here I come. Lesson number 10. Oh my goodness, it was only a 10-litre batch, but pulling those grains out was quite heavy. If I ever go up to the next scale, I'm going to have to think that through. Clearly, it is a challenge to pull all those grains out, given the weight. Lesson number 11 was the dry hops. Now, I did think I was just going to pull them out of the demijohn and away you go. I did leave a string in them before, and I was able to do that pretty easily because they're pretty soft, and there was just a pop as you pull them out. However, I was unable to sort of get hold of them in this case and had to siphon to secondary. Not a big deal, and all worked out in the wash, but yes, I didn't really sort of plan ahead when it come to how do I get the dry hops out of a demijohn. Lesson number 12 was using the set and wait carbonation, where I simply set the PSI to 10 and then put it away for 7 to 10 days. Worked perfectly. No forced carbonation, no rocking, etc. Just a simple carbonation method. Lesson number 13 was clarity. Wasn't it interesting between the two batches? Although clarity didn't really impact the taste at all, it was interesting how impactful that gelatin had on the second batch. Lesson number 14 is the verdant IPA yeast. Now this was recommended for its hop forward and malty flavours and provision of a good body, all of which I think was true. Also there were supposed to be flavours of apricot. I didn't quite detect that, but I did certainly detect those tropical and grapefruit flavours. So this was a good IPA yeast. My final takeaway, my final lesson 15, was just how good this brew turned out. Both batches, fantastic. Already my favourites of all of the brews I've ever done, and I'm going to do some more. On that note, happy home brewing. Do like and subscribe. Cheers. Addition. However, in terms of taste, no real. There we go, I've just lost my background. Lesson number 14 was the oh for God's sake. Lesson number 14 was the verdant IPA yeast. Now this was recommended for its Lesson number 14 was the verdant IPA yeast. Now this was recommended for its hop and malty flavor. Lesson number 16, don't work with animals, children and green screens.